The gunshot split the night air just as Josephine Lawson reached for the dressing room door, and she knew in that instant her life was about to change forever. She froze, one hand still extended toward the tarnished brass handle, her heart hammering against her corset so hard she thought her ribs might crack. The Dusty Rose saloon had fallen silent in the way only a room full of frightened people could be silent. That awful hush where everyone held their breath and waited to see if death would come calling. Josephine pressed herself against the faded wallpaper, the roses on it so worn she could barely make out their shapes anymore, and listened. Where is she? The voice belonged to Marcus Thorne, the man who claimed he owned her. He did not own her, of course, no matter what papers he waved around or what threats he made. But try telling that to a man who had bought the deed to every building on this side of San Pedro, California, including the saloon where she danced 6 nights a week for pennies and the occasional silver dollar from a generous drunk. Marcus, put the gun away. That was Helen, the saloon owner, her voice steady despite the circumstances. Helen had always been steady, even when the world around her crumbled. She is just a dancer. This is not worth killing over. She belongs to me. Marcus' voice carried that particular edge of a man who had convinced himself of his own righteousness. I paid good money for her contract. She performs here. She lives in my building. She owes me. And now I hear she is planning to run, to leave San Pedro without settling her debts. Josephine closed her eyes. Someone had talked. She had been so careful, saving every coin she could hide from Marcus' greedy fingers, planning her escape for months. She should have known word would get out. In a town like San Pedro in the year 1883, secrets were currency and everyone was looking to make a trade. I am not letting her go. Marcus' voice was closer now, just on the other side of the thin wall that separated the dressing room from the main floor. She signed a contract. 3 more years she owes me. 3 more years of dancing, and when I say dance, she dances. When I say smile, she smiles. When I say, that is enough. A new voice cut through Marcus' rant, and Josephine felt something shift in the air. This voice was different, quieter, but with an authority that made the floorboards creak as people shifted their weight. The lady wants to leave. Let her leave. Who the hell are you? Name is Daniel Grayson. I am just passing through, but I've got a problem with men who threaten women. Josephine cracked open the dressing room door, just enough to see through. The saloon was packed tonight, as it always was on Saturday evenings. Miners and ranch hands crowded around tables, their faces turned toward the confrontation unfolding near the bar. Marcus stood with his revolver still raised, his face flushed red with whiskey and rage. He was not a tall man, but he carried himself like he owned the world, his suit expensive, his boots polished to a shine that seemed obscene in this dusty corner of California. And facing him, calm as Sunday morning, stood a cowboy who looked like he had ridden straight out of one of those dime novels. Helen kept behind the bar. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with dark hair that needed cutting and a jaw that looked like it had been chiseled from the same stone as the mountains outside town. He wore the practical clothes of a working man, denim trousers dusty from the trail, a simple cotton shirt, a worn leather vest, and a gun belt slung low on his hips. His hands hung loose at his sides, but Josephine could see the readiness in his stance, the way a man looked when he knew how to handle trouble. "This is none of your concern, stranger," Marcus said, but his voice had lost some of its certainty. "I am making it my concern." Daniel Grayson had not moved, had not even blinked. "Put the gun away and let the lady be. She is under contract. Contracts can be bought out." "How much?" Marcus laughed, but it was an ugly sound. "More than a drifting cowboy has in his pockets, I guarantee that. Try me." The silence stretched taut as a rope. Josephine held her breath, her fingers gripping the door frame so hard her knuckles went white. She had seen men posture before, had seen fights break out over cards or whiskey or women. But this felt different. This felt like watching two storms circle each other, deciding which one would break first. $500, Marcus finally said. That is what she owes me. $500 and she can walk out that door a free woman. $500. Josephine nearly laughed at the absurdity. She had saved $43 in 2 years of dancing. At that rate, she would be an old woman before she earned her freedom. Done. Daniel reached into his vest and pulled out a leather pouch. The room collectively gasped as he counted out gold coins onto the bar, each one clinking with a sound that felt like a door unlocking. That is 500. Now tear up that contract. Marcus stared at the money like it might disappear if he blinked. You are serious, as the grave. Take the money and walk away. For a long moment, Marcus did not move. Josephine could see the war playing out across his face, greed fighting with pride, both of them losing to the simple reality that Daniel Grayson was not going to back down. Finally, Marcus lowered his gun and snatched up the coins, counting them twice before stuffing them into his pockets. Fine. The contract is void. He pulled a folded paper from his coat and threw it onto the bar. But you are making a mistake, Cowboy. That one has got expensive tastes and a wandering heart. Your gold would have been better spent on a good horse. I will take my chances. Daniel picked up the contract and held it out. Helen, you got a match. Helen struck a match against the bar and held it to the paper. They all watched as it caught fire, the edges curling black, the words that had bound Josephine to 3 more years of servitude turning to ash and smoke. When the flames got too close to his fingers, Daniel dropped the burning paper into a spittoon where it hissed and died. Miss, Daniel said, turning toward the dressing room without ever looking directly at where Josephine hid. You are free to go wherever you please. Then he walked out of the saloon, just like that, disappearing through the swinging doors into the California night. Josephine stood frozen for another heartbeat before her legs remembered how to move. She pushed through the dressing room door and ran across the saloon floor, ignoring the stairs, ignoring Helen calling her name, ignoring everything except the need to catch the man who had just bought her freedom. The street outside was dark, except for the scattered pools of light from saloon windows and the silvery glow of a half-moon. San Pedro was not a large town, just a collection of wooden buildings clustered around the harbor where ships came and went, bringing supplies and taking away whatever the local mines and ranches could produce. The air smelled of salt water and horse manure, and the ever-present dust that seemed to coat everything in this part of California. Daniel Grayson stood beside a beautiful bay horse, checking the saddle cinch with the methodical movements of a man who had done it 1,000 times before. He looked up when Josephine approached but did not seem surprised to see her. Why? The word burst out of her before she could think of something more eloquent to say. Why would you do that? You do not even know me. He shrugged, his hands still working the leather straps. Seemed like you needed help. That was $500. That is more money than most people see in a year. It is just money. Just money. Josephine felt slightly hysterical. You cannot just, people do not just give away $500 to strangers. Daniel finally looked at her, really looked at her, and Josephine felt the full weight of his attention like a physical thing. His eyes were dark, maybe brown or maybe deep green, she could not tell in the moonlight. But they were kind eyes, she realized. Kind and tired and maybe a little sad. My father died 3 months ago, he said quietly. Left me his ranch up in Wyoming and everything he had saved. He was a good man, worked hard his whole life, tried to do right by people. When he was dying, he made me promise something. What? He said a man's worth is not measured by what he keeps, but by what he gives away when it matters. Said he had regrets about times he could have helped folks but did not, and he did not want me carrying those same regrets. Daniel turned back to his horse. So when I saw you hiding behind that door, scared for your life because some man thought he owned you, I figured this was one of those times that mattered. Josephine felt tears prick her eyes and blinked them back furiously. She did not cry, not anymore. She had learned years ago that tears did not change anything. But standing in the dusty street, looking at this stranger who had just given away a fortune for no other reason than it was the right thing to do, she felt something crack open inside her chest. "Thank you," she whispered. "I do not know how to repay you. Do not need repaying. Just promise me you will use this chance, whatever it is you have been planning." He swung up into the saddle with an easy grace. "Do not waste your freedom. Wait." Josephine stepped forward, one hand reaching out though she did not quite touch him. "Where are you going?" "North. I have been traveling for a while now, seeing the country, trying to figure some things out. Thought I might head up through the valleys, maybe see the mountains before winter sets in." "Take me with you." The words surprised her as much as they seemed to surprise him. Daniel looked down at her, his expression unreadable. "Madam, I appreciate the offer, but I did not do this expecting anything in return. I know that." Josephine felt a strange certainty settling over her, the same certainty she had felt 2 years ago when she left Missouri with nothing but a carpet bag and a desperate need to get far away from everything she had known. "I am not offering myself to you. I need to leave San Pedro tonight. Marcus took your money, but men like him do not let go that easily. Come morning, he will have convinced himself you cheated him somehow, or that the contract did not count or something. He will come looking for me." Daniel was quiet for a long moment, his hands resting on the saddle horn. "Where were you planning to go? Before tonight?" "North." She smiled slightly. "I heard San Francisco is a place where a woman can start over, where there are theaters and real dance halls, places where they pay dancers like they are artists instead of—" She stopped herself. "Instead of property," Daniel finished quietly. He nodded slowly. "All right, but we do this proper. I will take you as far as San Francisco, help you get settled somewhere safe. But this is just, I understand." Josephine felt relief flood through her. "You are helping me, nothing more. I can live with that. You got things you need to collect, from the saloon or wherever you have been staying." Josephine thought of the tiny room she rented above the general store, the narrow bed and the cracked mirror and the few dresses hanging on pegs. She thought of the money hidden in a tin under the floorboard, her $43 of freedom. "Give me 10 minutes. I will be here." She ran back through town, her dancing slippers silent on the wooden sidewalks. The general store was dark, but she had a key to the back entrance. She took the stairs 2 at a time, stuffing her belongings into her old carpetbag with shaking hands. 2 dresses, a nightgown, a shawl, her good shoes. The tin of money went into her pocket. She looked around the room one last time, at the water-stained ceiling and the window that looked out over the alley, and felt nothing but relief to be leaving it behind. When she got back to the street, Daniel had been joined by another horse, a gray mare that looked tired but sound. "Thought you might need a ride," he said simply. "Borrowed her from the livery, left them enough money to buy 2 horses if we do not bring her back." "You keep paying for things," Josephine said as he helped her into the saddle. His hands were warm and calloused and careful. "Got plenty to pay with." He mounted his own horse and glanced at her. "You know how to ride?" "Well enough." It had been years, but her body remembered the rhythm. She settled into the saddle and gathered the reins. Then let us go before Marcus gets it in his head to come back with friends." They rode out of San Pedro as the clock in the church tower struck midnight, the sound following them like a benediction or a warning. Josephine did not look back. She had spent too much of her life looking back, at mistakes and losses and all the ways the world had tried to grind her down. Tonight, she would look forward. Tonight, she had a horse beneath her and the open road ahead, and a stranger who had given her back her life. The moon lit their way as they followed the coastal road north, the Pacific Ocean a dark presence to their left, sometimes visible when the road curved close to the cliffs, sometimes hidden behind hills thick with scrub oak and chaparral. Daniel set an easy pace, not pushing the horses but not dawdling either. He seemed content to ride in silence, his attention on the road and the darkness around them. After an hour, Josephine finally spoke. "Can I ask you something?" "Sure." "What were you doing in that saloon?" "You said you were just passing through." "I was." Daniel shifted in his saddle, stopped to get a meal and maybe a place to sleep, heard the commotion and went in to see what was happening. Just like that. You hear a gunshot and you walk toward it. He was quiet for a moment. "Got in the habit during the war. The closer you are to trouble, the more you can do about it. You fought last 2 years. I was young, barely 16 when I joined up. Thought it would be an adventure." His voice went flat. "It was not an adventure." Josephine heard the weight of memory in those words and did not push. She knew about things you did not want to talk about, experiences that left scars on the inside where no one else could see them. "I am sorry. Long time ago now." But the way he said it made her think it was not long enough, would never be long enough. "What about you? What brings a dancer to San Pedro?" It was her turn to be quiet. How much should she tell him? How much did he need to know about the life she was running from? "I grew up in Missouri," she finally said. "Little town outside Kansas City. My father was a preacher, very strict, very certain about the way the world should be. When I was 17, I told him I wanted to go to St. Louis to study dance. I had seen a performance once, a real ballet company that came through Kansas City, and it was the most beautiful thing I had ever witnessed. I thought if I could learn to dance like that, I could be part of something beautiful." He said no. He said dance was the devil's work and I was being foolish. Said my place was to marry some farmer and have babies and be content with a simple Christian life. The old anger stirred in her chest. So I left, took what money I had saved and got on a train to St. Louis. "Did you study dance?" "For 6 months. There was a studio that took on students, taught us ballet and modern dance and even some of the new styles coming over from Europe. It was hard work, harder than anything I had ever done, but I loved it. Every aching muscle, every blister, every time I thought I could not do another combination, I loved it." "What happened?" Josephine watched the road unspool before them. "Money ran out. The studio was expensive, and St. Louis was expensive, and I had been naive about how long my savings would last. I tried to find work, but no one wants to hire a woman with no skills except dancing. So I ended up in a dance hall, then another, working my way west because I heard California was full of opportunities. By the time I got to San Pedro, I was tired and broke and desperate enough to sign Marcus' contract without reading it properly. That is not your fault. Men like him prey on desperation. Maybe, but I still signed it." They rode in silence for another mile. The road had turned inland now, climbing gradually into hills covered with sage and wild grasses that rustled in the night breeze. Somewhere in the darkness, a coyote howled, and Josephine heard Daniel's horse snort softly. "Can I ask you something now?" Daniel said. "Only fair. You said you wanted to go to San Francisco, find a place where you could dance like an artist. Is that still what you want?" After everything tonight, after he paused. After being free, Josephine really thought about it for the first time in years. Yes, she said slowly, maybe even more now. Marcus tried to make me small, tried to make me think dancing was just something for men to look at, something cheap and meaningless. But it is not. Dance is expression and art and freedom all wrapped up together. When I dance, really dance, I feel like I am exactly who I was meant to be. Does that make sense? Yeah, Daniel's voice was soft. It does. They rode through the rest of the night, stopping once to water the horses at a creek and let them rest. Daniel shared dried beef and hard biscuits from his saddlebags, and they sat on opposite sides of a fallen log, eating in comfortable silence. The sky was starting to lighten in the east when they finally made camp in a small grove of oak trees, far enough from the road to be hidden but close enough to hear if anyone came. Daniel unsaddled the horses and hobbled them where they could graze while Josephine spread out the bedrolls he had packed. She was exhausted, running on nerves and the fading rush of adrenaline, but she felt strangely awake, hyper-aware of every sound and smell and sensation. The air was cool, tinged with the scent of crushed grass and oak leaves. Birds were starting to sing their morning songs, and Daniel moved through the camp with quiet efficiency, building a small fire, filling a pot with water from his canteen. "You should sleep," he said when she yawned for the third time. "We will rest here until afternoon, then ride on when it is cooler. What about you? I will keep watch for a while, make sure no one followed us." Josephine wanted to argue, but her body was already shutting down, demanding rest. She lay down on one of the bedrolls, pulling her shawl over her shoulders, and closed her eyes. The last thing she heard before sleep took her was the crackle of the fire, and Daniel humming something low and tuneless under his breath. She woke to afternoon sunshine filtering through the oak leaves and the smell of coffee. Daniel was sitting by the fire, feeding it small sticks, the coffee pot balanced on a flat rock at the edge of the flames. He looked tired, she realized, like he had not slept at all. "You were supposed to rest," she said, sitting up and pushing her hair out of her face. "Did rest, just did not sleep. There is a difference." He poured coffee into a tin cup and handed it to her. "How are you feeling?" "Like I ran away in the middle of the night with a stranger." She sipped the coffee and grimaced at the bitterness. "Which I did." Daniel smiled slightly, and Josephine realized it was the first time she had seen him smile. It transformed his face, softening the hard lines, crinkling the corners of his eyes. "Fair assessment. For what it is worth, I have never done anything like this before. Buying out contracts, riding off into the night, helping women escape bad situations. This is new territory for me. But you fought in a war. You must have been in dangerous situations before." "That was different." "War is chaos, but at least everyone knows they are in chaos together. This feels more personal, I guess. Like if I make a mistake, it is not just me who pays for it." Josephine studied him over the rim of her cup. In the daylight, she could see him more clearly. He was younger than she had first thought, maybe 25 or 26, though his eyes looked older. He had a scar above his left eyebrow, faint but visible, and his hands were scarred too, the hands of someone who had worked hard and fought harder. But there was a gentleness in the way he moved, a carefulness that spoke to character. "Why did you really help me?" she asked. "And do not tell me it was just because of a promise to your father. There has to be more to it than that." Daniel was quiet for a long time, staring into the fire. When he finally spoke, his voice was distant. "I had a sister, Caroline. She was 2 years younger than me, smart and funny and stubborn as a mule. When I went off to war, she begged me not to go, said we needed to stick together after Ma died. But I went anyway, thought I was doing something noble." "What happened to her?" "She got involved with a man while I was gone. He made her promises, told her he loved her, convinced her to move to Denver with him. Turned out he was not looking for a wife. He put her to work in one of his establishments, made her, Daniel, hands clenched. When I came back from the war and found out what happened, I went looking for her. Found her in a crib in the worst part of Denver, so thin I barely recognized her. She had pneumonia, too sick to work anymore, so he had just thrown her out like trash. Oh, Daniel. Josephine felt tears sting her eyes. I brought her home, nursed her as best I could, but it was too late. She died 3 weeks after I found her. Last thing she said to me was that she was sorry, that she had made a mistake and wished she could take it back. Daniel looked up at Josephine and she saw raw pain in his eyes. I should have been there, should have protected her, should have done something. It was not your fault, maybe not. But I swore then that if I ever had a chance to help someone like her, someone trapped by a man who thought he owned them, I would take it. No hesitation, no questions. He gestured at her. So that is why I helped you, because Caroline did not have anyone to help her when she needed it, but you did. And I will be damned if I waste that chance. Josephine set down her coffee cup and moved around the fire to sit beside him. She did not touch him, did not say anything, just sat there in solidarity with his grief and his determination to make meaning out of loss. After a moment, Daniel nodded slightly, as if acknowledging her presence, and they sat together in silence while the fire burned low and the afternoon aged around them. They rode on as the sun began its descent toward the western horizon, following back roads and cattle trails that Daniel seemed to know by instinct. He had a map in his saddlebags, he told her, but he barely needed to consult it. He had spent the last 3 months wandering through California, getting to know the land, looking for something though he could not quite articulate what. "What about your ranch?" Josephine asked as they crossed a dry riverbed, the horses picking their way carefully over the smooth stones. "The one your father left you. It is still there. Hired a good foreman to manage it while I was gone. He will keep things running until I figure out what I want to do with it. You are thinking of selling, maybe. I do not know. It was my father's dream, not mine. He spent 30 years building that ranch, turning it from nothing into something respectable. But I am not sure I am cut out to be a rancher." "What are you cut out for?" Daniel shrugged, still trying to figure that out. "After the war, I thought I would just go back to ranching, live a quiet life, maybe find a wife and have kids like my father wanted. But when I got back, it all felt wrong, like I was trying to squeeze myself into someone else's life." "I understand that feeling," Josephine said softly. "That is how I felt in Missouri, like I was supposed to be someone I was not. So we are both running from who we are supposed to be, or running toward who we actually are." Daniel glanced at her and something passed between them, a recognition of shared experience. "I like that better. Running toward instead of running from." They made better time over the next few days, covering ground at a steady pace. Daniel knew where to find water and game, where to camp safely, how to read the land and the weather. He shot a rabbit on the 3rd day and showed Josephine how to prepare it properly, his hands quick and efficient with the knife. They roasted it over the fire and ate with their fingers, the meat tender and smoky. "When did you learn to do all this?" Josephine asked, licking grease from her thumb. "Growing up on a ranch, you learn to be self-sufficient, and the war taught me the rest, how to make do with nothing, how to survive when things go wrong. It seems like the war taught you a lot of terrible things. It did, but it taught me some good things too. Like how much you can endure when you have to, like how important it is to hold on to your humanity when everything around you is trying to strip it away." He stared into the fire. "I saw men do horrible things during the war. But I also saw men share their last piece of bread, carry wounded soldiers for miles, sacrifice themselves to save their friends. The worst and the best of humanity, all mixed up together. Which one are you? The question slipped out before Josephine could stop it. Daniel looked at her, his expression unreadable. I am still trying to figure that out too. They crossed into the Central Valley on the 5th day, the landscape opening up into vast expanses of grassland dotted with oak trees. The summer heat was fierce here, the sun beating down without mercy, and they took to riding in the early morning and late afternoon, resting during the hottest part of the day in whatever shade they could find. Josephine found herself watching Daniel more and more as they traveled. She noticed the way he always checked on the horses before seeing to his own needs, the way he shared food equally even when supplies ran low, the way he never crowded her or made her feel uncomfortable. He kept a respectful distance at night, always giving her the better spot to sleep, always making sure she felt safe. But more than that, she found herself drawn to him in ways that surprised her. The way his face looked when he concentrated on something, brow furrowed slightly, lips pressed together. The way he laughed, rare but genuine, when she told him stories about the more ridiculous customers at the saloon. The way his voice softened when he talked about his father or his sister, love and loss woven together. She was falling for him. She realized on the 7th night as they sat by the fire. Actually falling for him, in the dangerous heart-aching way she had promised herself. She would never fall again after the disaster in St. Louis, after learning that love was just another trap that could bind you tighter than any contract. But Daniel did not feel like a trap. He felt like freedom. "What are you thinking about?" he asked, catching her staring at him. "Everything. Nothing. The future." She pulled her shawl tighter around her shoulders. The nights were getting cooler as they traveled north. "I have been so focused on escaping for so long, I never really thought about what comes after. What I will do once I am actually free. You said you wanted to dance in San Francisco. I do, but what if I am not good enough? It has been 2 years since I did any real dancing, anything beyond entertaining drunk minors. What if I have lost it?" Daniel leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. "Back in San Pedro, you said dancing made you feel like you were exactly who you were meant to be. That does not go away. Maybe it gets buried under fear and survival, but it does not disappear. How do you know? Because I see it in the way you move. Even just doing ordinary things, there is a grace to you, a consciousness of your body in space. You are a dancer, Josephine. That is not something you can lose." The way he said her name, soft and certain, made her chest tight. "Thank you for that. Just the truth." He stood and stretched, his joints popping. "We should sleep. Tomorrow we will reach the mission at San Juan Bautista. We can rest there, get proper supplies. Is it safe? For me, I mean." "Should be. The Padres there do not ask questions, and the mission is big enough we can blend in with other travelers." He hesitated. "But if you would rather skip it, we can. I know you are worried about Marcus sending people after you." Josephine thought about it. They had not seen any signs of pursuit, but that did not mean much. Marcus had connections, and $500 was enough to motivate people to search far and wide. But they needed supplies, and she was tired of dried meat and hard biscuits and sleeping on the ground. "No, let us stop there. We need a real meal and a proper rest." "All right, but we stay cautious, keep our heads down." The mission at San Juan Bautista was beautiful in the way old Spanish buildings could be. All whitewashed adobe and red tile roofs, surrounded by gardens that seemed impossibly green in the dry California landscape. They arrived in the late afternoon, dusty and tired, and were greeted by a young padre who barely glanced at them before directing them to the travelers' quarters. The room he gave them was simple but clean, with 2 narrow beds and a window that looked out over the gardens. There was a communal dining hall where travelers could eat for a small donation, and a bathhouse where Josephine nearly cried with joy at the prospect of hot water. "Go on," Daniel said when he saw her eyeing the bathhouse. "I will take care of the horses and get us some food." Josephine did not need to be told twice. She grabbed her clean dress from her carpet bag and practically ran to the bathhouse, where an elderly woman heated water in a large copper basin. The bath cost her 2 of her precious dollars, but it was worth every penny. She scrubbed away a week of trail dust and sweat, washed her hair with the harsh lye soap the woman provided, and soaked until her fingers pruned and the water grew cold. When she emerged, dressed in her clean clothes with her hair still damp and hanging loose down her back, she felt almost human again. Daniel was waiting outside the bathhouse, and he did a small double take when he saw her. "You look," he stopped himself. "Different. Good different." Josephine felt heat rise in her cheeks that had nothing to do with the hot bath. "Thank you. You should go. The water is still relatively warm." While Daniel bathed, Josephine walked through the mission gardens, breathing in the scent of roses and herbs and the rich earth. A few other travelers were there, families mostly, and a couple of merchants heading north with wagons full of goods. No one paid her any attention, which was exactly what she wanted. She found a bench in a quiet corner of the garden and sat down, tipping her face up to catch the last rays of sunlight. For the first time in years, she felt something close to peace. Not happiness, not yet, but the absence of constant fear. The absence of looking over her shoulder, waiting for Marcus to appear and drag her back. "Mind if I join you?" Daniel stood a few feet away, his hair wet and slicked back, his face clean-shaven for the first time since she had met him. Without the stubble, he looked younger, more open, and Josephine felt her heart do something complicated in her chest. "Please." He sat beside her, not too close but close enough that she could smell the soap on his skin. They sat in companionable silence, watching the sky turn from blue to gold to deep orange as the sun set behind the mountains. "This is nice," Daniel said eventually. "Peaceful." "It is. Though I keep waiting for something to go wrong. Is that terrible?" "No, just realistic. We have both learned that peace does not last. But you want it to, do not you? Last, I mean." Daniel turned to look at her, and in the fading light his eyes looked very dark and very serious. "Yeah, I do. I am tired of running, tired of fighting, tired of carrying all this." He gestured vaguely at his chest. "All this weight around. I want to find somewhere I can just be. Do you know what I mean?" "I do." Josephine felt brave, made brave by the sunset and the garden and the fact that she might never get another chance to say what she was thinking. "Daniel, I want to tell you something." "All right." "When you bought my freedom, I was grateful, more grateful than I could ever express. And I thought that was all it was, gratitude. But these last few days, traveling with you, getting to know you, I have realized it is more than that." She took a breath. "I am falling in love with you. And I know that is probably not what you want to hear, and I know we have only known each other a week, but I needed you to know. Because I do not want to get to San Francisco and spend the rest of my life wondering what might have happened if I had been brave enough to say it." Daniel stared at her, his expression unreadable. The silence stretched so long that Josephine started to panic, started to think she had made a terrible mistake. Then he reached out and took her hand, his fingers warm and calloused and gentle. "Josephine," he said quietly, "I need to tell you something too." Her heart hammered. "What?" "I bought your freedom because it was the right thing to do, but I agreed to take you to San Francisco because I could not stand the thought of never seeing you again. And somewhere between San Pedro and here, between all the miles and the conversations and watching you be brave and strong and so damn beautiful it hurts to look at you sometimes, I fell in love with you too. Really, really." He smiled, and it was that rare, genuine smile that transformed his whole face. "I did not plan on it, did not even want it if I am honest. Love has only brought me pain before, but this feels different. You feel different. Different how? Like maybe we are running toward the same thing. Like maybe we could stop running together." Josephine felt tears spill down her cheeks, but for once they were happy tears. "I would like that. I would really like that." Daniel reached up and wiped the tears away with his thumb. "Can I kiss you?" "Yes, please, yes." He leaned in slowly, giving her every chance to change her mind, and kissed her so gently she thought she might break apart. His lips were soft and warm, tasting of soap and something uniquely him. Josephine sighed into the kiss, her free hand coming up to rest against his chest where she could feel his heart beating fast and hard. When they pulled apart, Daniel rested his forehead against hers. "I have been wanting to do that for days. Why did you wait?" "Wanted to make sure you wanted it too. Wanted to make sure I was not taking advantage of the situation. Daniel Grayson, you are possibly the most honorable man I have ever met, just trying to do right by you." "Well, you are. More than right." She kissed him again, less gently this time, and felt him respond in kind, his arms coming around her, pulling her close. They kissed until the sky went dark and the evening bell rang, calling everyone to dinner. They ate in the communal dining hall with the other travelers. Simple food of beans and tortillas and roasted peppers, but it tasted like a feast. Daniel kept finding excuses to touch her, his knee against hers under the table, his hand on her back as they left the hall. And Josephine felt lighter than air, giddy with the knowledge that he loved her, that this beautiful, impossible thing was actually happening. That night, they lay in their separate beds in the little room, talking in the darkness about everything and nothing. About childhoods and dreams and all the places they wanted to go. Daniel told her about Wyoming winters and summer thunderstorms that rolled across the plains like God's own cavalry. Josephine told him about Missouri fireflies and the way the Mississippi looked at dawn. "Come with me," Daniel said suddenly. "To Wyoming." Josephine rolled over to face his bed, though she could barely see him in the darkness. "What about San Francisco? What about me dancing? You can still dance. There are theaters in Cheyenne, maybe not as grand as San Francisco, but they exist. And if you want to go to San Francisco later, we can. But first, come see the ranch with me. Help me figure out if I am meant to be a rancher or if I should sell it and we can go somewhere else entirely. Together." "Together," Josephine repeated, testing the word. "I like the sound of that." "Is that a yes?" "Yes. Absolutely yes." She heard him get out of bed, and then he was kneeling beside hers, taking her hand in the darkness. "I know this is fast. I know we have only known each other a week, but I have never been more certain of anything in my life. You are what I have been looking for, Josephine. You are the reason all the running and searching makes sense. You gave me a reason to stay," she whispered. "When I was hiding behind that door, waiting for Marcus to find me, I was so tired. Tired of fighting, tired of surviving, tired of being alone. I was ready to give up. But then you walked in and you stood up for me and you bought my freedom, and for the first time in years, I had a reason to keep going. A reason to believe things could be different." Daniel climbed into bed with her, fully clothed, just holding her in the darkness. She tucked her head under his chin and listened to his heartbeat, steady and strong, and thought about how strange life was. A week ago, she had been trapped and terrified. Now she was in the arms of a man who loved her, with a future stretching out before them full of possibility. They left the mission early the next morning, provisioned and rested. But instead of continuing north toward San Francisco, they turned east, heading toward the passes that would take them across the Sierra Nevada and into Nevada. the first leg of the long journey to Wyoming. The crossing was hard, harder than anything they had done so far. The passes were steep and rocky, the altitude making it difficult to breathe. They saw other travelers heading west, whole families in wagons, but few going east this late in the season. Daniel assured her they would make it before the snows came, but Josephine could see him checking the sky constantly, gauging the weather. They spent 2 weeks crossing the mountains, camping in the high country where the air was so thin and cold that Josephine could see her breath even in summer. But Daniel kept her warm at night, holding her close in their shared bedroll, his body heat and the wool blankets keeping the worst of the cold at bay. During the days, as they rode, they talked about everything. Plans for the ranch, whether they would keep it or sell it. What kind of life they wanted to build together. Daniel talked about maybe starting a horse breeding operation, focusing on quality over quantity. Josephine talked about teaching dance, maybe opening a small studio in Cheyenne where girls could learn proper technique. "You would be a wonderful teacher," Daniel said as they navigated a particularly tricky section of trail. "You have the patience for it, and the passion. I used to dream about it back when I was studying in St. Louis, not just performing but passing on the art to the next generation." She patted her horse's neck. "It feels good to dream again." "Good, you should always dream. We both should." They descended into Nevada as summer turned toward autumn, the days still warm but the nights getting colder. They passed through small mining towns where Daniel traded some of his remaining gold for supplies. No one asked questions. No one seemed to recognize Josephine, and slowly she began to relax, to believe that maybe Marcus had decided she was not worth chasing. In a town called Elko, they stopped at a small church and asked the minister to marry them. He was an elderly man with kind eyes who did not ask about the lack of family or friends, just led them through the simple ceremony with his wife as witness. Daniel had bought a thin gold band from a local jeweler, and when he slipped it onto Josephine's finger, she cried. "I never thought I would have this," she said as they left the church, newly married, walking down the dusty street hand in hand. "A husband who loves me. A future that is mine to choose. Well, you have it now, and I am not going anywhere." They spent their wedding night in a proper hotel, the first real bed they had shared, and Josephine discovered that intimacy could be gentle and joyful and full of laughter, instead of the grim transaction she had always feared it would be. Daniel was patient and careful and so attentive to her comfort that she fell even more deeply in love with him, if that was possible. The next morning, they continued east, crossing into Wyoming as the leaves began to turn gold and red. The landscape changed again, opening up into the vast rolling plains that Daniel had described, broken by rocky outcroppings and the occasional river valley thick with cottonwoods. "Almost home," Daniel said as they crested a ridge and looked out over the land. "The ranch is about 2 days' ride from here. Are you nervous?" "A little. I have been gone for months, not sure what I will find when we get there." "Whatever it is, we will figure it out together." He smiled at her, that beautiful rare smile. "Yeah, we will." They arrived at the Grayson Ranch on a clear October afternoon, the sky so blue it hurt to look at. The ranch was bigger than Josephine had imagined, with a large main house, several barns and corrals full of horses. As they rode up the long drive, a man came out of the barn, shading his eyes against the sun. Daniel Grayson, is that you?" "Hello, Frank." Daniel dismounted and shook the man's hand. "How have things been?" "Good, good. We brought in a decent foal crop this spring and the mares are all healthy. I did not expect you back so soon." Frank looked at Josephine with undisguised curiosity. "And who is this?" Frank, this is my wife, Josephine. Josephine, this is Frank Mercer, the best foreman in Wyoming. Wife. Frank's eyes widened. Well, I will be damned. Congratulations. Please come in, both of you. You must be exhausted from traveling. The main house was warm and well kept, thanks to Frank and his wife Martha, who lived in a smaller house on the property. Martha fussed over them, insisting they eat a proper meal and rest. She showed Josephine around the house, which was spacious and well built, with large windows that let in plenty of light and a kitchen that made Josephine want to learn to cook properly. It is a good house, Martha said as they stood in the main bedroom, which overlooked the corrals and the mountains beyond. Daniel father built it with his own hands, him and a crew of good men, meant it to be filled with family. I hope it will be, Josephine said softly. Over the next few weeks, they settled into life on the ranch. Daniel worked alongside Frank, learning all the things his father had done, making decisions about which horses to keep and which to sell, planning for the winter. Josephine threw herself into making the house a home, cleaning and organizing, planting a late herb garden that Martha said might survive the first frost. But more than that, she started dancing again. She found an unused room in the barn, cleared it out, and set up a makeshift studio with a rail made from an old fence post. Every morning, she practiced, working through the combinations and exercises she had learned years ago in St. Louis, feeling her body slowly remember what it had once known. Daniel found her there one morning, covered in sweat, her hair falling out of its pins. He leaned against the doorframe and watched as she finished a series of turns, her arms graceful, her face concentrated and utterly beautiful. "You are amazing," he said when she finally noticed him. "I am rusty." "You are amazing," he repeated firmly. "Martha told me what you have been doing, said you are out here every morning before dawn. I need to get back to where I was, better than where I was." She walked over to him, accepting the water jug he offered. "I have been thinking about what we talked about in the mountains, about teaching." "Yeah. There is a schoolhouse in town. I went to visit it last week when I went for supplies. It is run by a woman named Sarah. She teaches reading and writing and arithmetic to all the local children." Josephine took a breath. I asked her if she would be interested in adding dance lessons, just once a week, nothing too elaborate. She said yes. Daniel's face broke into a wide smile. "Josephine, that is wonderful. When do you start?" "Next month, after the harvest is fully in and families have more time. I am terrified. You are going to be brilliant." He pulled her close, not caring that she was sweaty and disheveled. "I am so proud of you. Thank you for bringing me here, for giving me a place where I can do this. This is your home now, our home, and you can do whatever you want here." As winter closed in, Josephine started her dance classes. 6 little girls showed up that first week, shy and curious, and Josephine taught them basic positions and how to hold their bodies with grace. By the second week, there were 10 girls. By the third, several of their mothers asked if they could join too. Daniel would sometimes watch from the back of the schoolhouse, his face soft with pride. And in those moments, Josephine felt a completeness she had never experienced before. She was dancing again, teaching the art she loved, married to a man who supported her dreams, living in a place where she was free to be exactly who she was meant to be. The first snow came in November, blanketing the ranch in white. Josephine stood at the bedroom window, watching the flakes fall, and felt Daniel's arms come around her from behind. "What are you thinking about?" he asked, his chin resting on her shoulder. "How different my life is now from a year ago. How much has changed." "Good changes, the best changes." She turned in his arms to face him. "I need to tell you something." His expression shifted to concern. "What is wrong?" "Nothing is wrong. Everything is right, actually." She took his hand and placed it on her stomach. "I am pregnant." Daniel stared at her, processing the information, and then his face broke into the biggest smile she had ever seen. "Really? You are sure? Martha helped me confirm it last week. She said I am about 2 months along. We will have a baby in the spring." "A baby?" Daniel laughed, a sound of pure joy. "We are going to have a baby, Josephine. I do not even have words. Say you are happy." "I am more than happy. This is everything. You are everything." He kissed her, deep and thorough, and when he pulled back his eyes were wet. "Thank you." "For what?" "For trusting me, for loving me, for building this life with me, for giving me a family again." "You gave me all those things first," Josephine said, tears spilling down her own cheeks. "You saved me, Daniel. You gave me a reason to stay, to keep fighting. To believe in love and happiness and futures that do not involve just surviving. You gave me everything." "Then I guess we gave each other everything," he said softly, "and we are just getting started." Winter passed in a blur of preparation. Daniel and Frank built a cradle from oak wood, carved with intricate patterns. Martha taught Josephine how to sew baby clothes, and she spent long evenings by the fire, her hands busy with soft cotton and wool. The women from her dance class threw her a gathering, bringing gifts and advice and stories of their own pregnancies. Josephine continued teaching dance until she was too big to demonstrate properly, then switched to teaching by instruction, sitting on a chair and guiding the students through their exercises. She found she enjoyed this just as much, seeing them learn and grow and gain confidence in their bodies. Daniel was attentive and protective without being overbearing, making sure she did not overwork herself, but respecting her independence. He read books about pregnancy and childbirth that he borrowed from the doctor in town, and he talked to the baby every night, his hand on Josephine's swelling stomach, telling their child about the ranch and the horses and how much they were already loved. Spring arrived with a rush of green, and the sound of foals being born in the corrals. And on a bright April morning, with Martha attending and Daniel pacing anxiously outside, Josephine gave birth to a healthy baby boy. They named him Charles, after Daniel's father, and when Daniel finally came into the room and saw his son for the first time, he wept openly. "He is perfect," Daniel whispered, holding the tiny bundle with infinite care. "He is absolutely perfect." "Just like his father," Josephine said tiredly, watching the two of them with a full heart. Charles was a good baby, healthy and curious and blessed with his father's dark hair and his mother's green eyes. Daniel was a natural father, patient and loving, singing soft songs in the middle of the night when Charles would not sleep, teaching him about horses and cattle before he could even sit up properly. Josephine went back to teaching dance when Charles was 3 months old, bringing him with her to classes where the students took turns holding him while she demonstrated. Her studio had outgrown the schoolhouse and moved to the ranch, where Daniel had converted one of the barns into a proper dance hall with mirrors he ordered from Denver and a floor he sanded smooth himself. The years passed in a rhythm of seasons and growth. Charles learned to walk, then to ride, then to help with the horses under his father's patient guidance. Josephine's dance studio became known throughout the region, drawing students from neighboring ranches and even from Cheyenne. She choreographed performances that the students put on twice a year, events that the whole community attended. Daniel found his calling in breeding horses, developing a line of strong, intelligent animals that were sought after by ranchers and the cavalry. The ranch prospered, and with the prosperity came the ability to give back, to help others the way Daniel had once helped Josephine. They hired young men who needed work, took in a few stray children over the years who needed a place to stay, always making sure their home was open to those who needed it. When Charles was 3, Josephine gave birth to twin girls, Emma and Grace. 2 years after that came another boy, William. The house was full of noise and life and love, children running through the halls, bringing in frogs and wildflowers and all manner of treasures. Josephine sometimes thought about that night in San Pedro, about hiding behind a dressing room door, terrified and trapped, certain her life was over. She thought about how one moment, one decision, one man with a kind heart and a father's promise had changed everything. And she was grateful, so deeply grateful, for the twist of fate that had brought Daniel Grayson into that saloon at exactly the right moment. On their 10th anniversary, Daniel took Josephine up to a ridge overlooking the ranch, the same ridge where they had first glimpsed their future together. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, and below them they could see the house, the barns, the corrals full of horses. Smoke rose from the chimney where Martha was watching the children. "You remember what you said to me that first night?" Daniel asked, his arm around her waist. "I said a lot of things that first night. You said I gave you a reason to stay, to keep fighting. I remember." Josephine leaned into him, comfortable and warm despite the cool evening air. "It was true. You did. You know what you gave me?" "What?" "A reason to stop running. A reason to believe I could be more than my mistakes and my grief. A reason to build something instead of just surviving." He turned to face her, taking both her hands. "You gave me everything, Josephine. A home, a family, a purpose. You gave me love when I thought I was not capable of it anymore. You gave me a future." "We gave each other a future," Josephine said, echoing his words from that snowy night so many years ago. "And I would not change a single moment of it, not even the scary parts. The running, the uncertainty, all the times we did not know if we would make it, not even those, because they led us here." She gestured at the ranch spread out below them. "To this life we built together, to our children and our home and this love that just keeps growing." Daniel kissed her as the sun touched the horizon, a kiss that tasted of years and tenderness and promises kept. When they pulled apart, they stood together on that ridge, watching night fall over their land, over their life, over the future they had fought so hard to create. Below them, the lamp light flickered on in the house. They could hear the faint sound of children laughing, of Martha calling them to dinner. Their world, their family, their reason for everything. "We should go down," Josephine said eventually, "before Martha sends out a search party." "In a minute." Daniel held her close, breathing in the scent of her hair, feeling the solid warmth of her in his arms. "I just want to stay here a little longer, remember how we started, and see how far we have come, exactly." They stayed on that ridge until the stars came out, until the chill drove them down to the warmth of home. And as they walked hand in hand down the familiar path, Josephine thought about beginnings and endings, about how sometimes the worst moments could transform into the best, about how love could save you even when you had given up on being saved. She thought about dancing, about freedom, about the long road from San Pedro to Wyoming, about a cowboy who walked into a saloon and changed her life with $500 and a good heart, about the words she had spoken in a mission garden that still held true all these years later. "You gave me a reason to stay," and he had. Daniel had given her every reason to stay, to fight, to love, to build, to believe. He had given her himself, and in return she had given him herself, and together they had created something neither of them could have imagined alone: a family, a home, a life full of meaning and purpose and joy. As they reached the house and heard their children calling for them, as they stepped into the warm light and the welcoming chaos of their evening routine, Josephine felt a contentment so deep it was almost overwhelming. This was what she had been searching for all along, even when she had not known what she was searching for, not just freedom, though she had that, Not just the ability to dance, though she had that too. What she had been searching for was belonging, connection. Love that was not conditional or transactional but freely given and freely received. She had found it in the most unexpected place, in the arms of a stranger who became her husband, her partner, her reason for everything. Years continued to pass in that gentle rhythm of ranch life. Charles grew into a young man who loved horses as much as his father, who had his mother's grace and his father's steady determination. The twins became inseparable, one outgoing and bold, the other quiet and thoughtful, both of them inheriting Josephine's passion for dance. William was the family comedian, always making them laugh, always finding joy in the smallest things. Daniel's hair began to gray at the temples, and Josephine found laugh lines around her eyes when she looked in the mirror. They grew older together, their love deepening and maturing, weathering the inevitable challenges that life brought. Droughts and harsh winters, sick animals and financial worries, the normal struggles of raising children and managing a ranch. But through it all, they had each other. And that made all the difference. Josephine never stopped teaching dance. Even as her body aged and she could no longer demonstrate the more difficult moves, she continued to instruct, to guide, to inspire. Some of her students went on to perform in theaters in Cheyenne and Denver, and even San Francisco. One even made it to New York, sending back letters full of excitement and gratitude, thanking Josephine for believing in her. Daniel continued to breed horses, his reputation growing until the Grayson Ranch was known throughout the West for quality stock. But he never let the business consume him. He always made time for his family, for long dinners around the table, for teaching his sons to ride and rope, for dancing with his daughters in the parlor while Josephine played the piano. On their 20th anniversary, their children threw them a celebration at the ranch. The whole community came, filling the dance hall Josephine had built, eating and drinking and sharing stories. Daniel gave a short speech, his arm around Josephine, his voice thick with emotion. 20 years ago, he said, I walked into a saloon in San Pedro not knowing my life was about to change. I met a woman who was braver than she knew, stronger than anyone gave her credit for, and more beautiful than anyone I had ever seen. I helped her that night, but the truth is, she saved me just as much as I saved her. She gave me a reason to stop running and start living. She gave me this. He gestured at the crowd, at the ranch, at their life, and I will spend the rest of my days being grateful for that. Josephine wiped tears from her eyes as everyone applauded. Then it was her turn to speak. I do not have a grand speech prepared, she said, her voice carrying through the hall. I just want to say that love is not always dramatic. Sometimes it is quiet and steady. Sometimes it is showing up every day and choosing each other over and over again. Daniel has chosen me every day for 20 years. He has supported my dreams, raised our children with me, built this life with me. And I have never once regretted saying yes when he asked me to come to Wyoming with him. This is my home. He is my home, and I will love him until my last breath and beyond. More applause, more tears, and then the music started and everyone danced. Josephine danced with Daniel, then with each of her children, then with Frank, who was now old and gray but still spry enough to spin her around the floor. She danced until her feet hurt and her face ached from smiling. Later, when the party had wound down and the guests had gone home, Josephine and Daniel sat on the porch swing, wrapped in a blanket, watching the stars wheel overhead. You ever think about that night? Josephine asked. About what would have happened if you had not walked into that saloon? Sometimes. But then I remember that everything happens for a reason. My father dying, me traveling, ending up in San Pedro that exact night. It all led me to you. You really believe that? That it was meant to be. I do not you. Josephine thought about it, about fate and choice and all the random chances that had to align for them to find each other. Yes, she said finally. I think I do, because nothing else makes sense. Out of all the places you could have stopped, all the nights you could have passed through San Pedro, it happened to be that night. The exact night I needed you most. Maybe my father knew, Daniel said softly. Maybe somehow he guided me there. Maybe he did, and maybe Caroline did too. Daniel nodded, his eyes distant with memory. I like to think they are both out there somewhere watching over us, proud of the life we built. I think they are. How could they not be? They sat in comfortable silence, rocking gently, the night wrapping around them like a familiar embrace. Inside the house, they could hear the muffled sounds of their children getting ready for bed, Martha's voice gently chiding someone about brushing their teeth. Josephine, Daniel said. Yes, thank you. For what? For staying, for loving me, for building this life with me. For giving me a family and a home and a reason to wake up every morning. You do not have to thank me for that. It has been my joy. Still, I wanted you to know, wanted you to hear me say it. He kissed her temple. You are the best thing that ever happened to me. And you are the best thing that ever happened to me. We are lucky, Daniel, so incredibly lucky. That we are. They stayed on that porch swing until the cold drove them inside, until they could no longer ignore the need for sleep. And as they climbed into bed, the same bed they had shared for 20 years, Josephine felt that familiar sense of contentment, of rightness, of being exactly where she was meant to be. The years continued their march, as years always do. Children grew up and left home, Charles to start his own ranch, the twins to pursue their own dreams, one in dance and one in teaching, William to become a veterinarian specializing in horses. The house that had once been so full of noise became quieter, just Josephine and Daniel and Martha, who was now more family than employee. But the quiet was not empty. It was full of memories and love and the deep satisfaction of a life well lived. They had grandchildren now, who came to visit and brought their own noise and chaos and joy. Josephine taught them to dance in the same hall where she had taught their parents. Daniel taught them to ride, to care for animals, to value hard work and honesty. On their 40th anniversary, they returned to that ridge above the ranch. It had become a tradition, going there every year to watch the sunset and remember. Daniel moved slower now, his joints stiff with age, but he still held Josephine's hand with the same warmth as that first night. 40 years, Josephine said, looking out over the land. It does not seem possible. Best 40 years of my life, mine too. She leaned against him, fitting into his side the way she had for 4 decades. Do you have any regrets? Not a single one. You. Only that I did not meet you sooner, that we did not have more time. We have had plenty of time, and we are not done yet. No, Josephine agreed. We are not done yet. They stayed on that ridge as the sun painted the sky, as the shadows lengthened and the day gave way to night. And when they finally made their way back down to the house, supporting each other over the rough ground, Josephine thought about that frightened girl hiding in a saloon dressing room, certain her life was over. If she could go back and tell that girl what waited for her, what joy and love and fulfillment lay just beyond that door, would she believe it? Probably not. It would have seemed too much like a fairy tale, too good to be true. But it was true. All of it. The cowboy who saved her, the journey across the country, the ranch in Wyoming, the children and grandchildren, the 40 years of love and partnership, and building something meaningful together. It was all gloriously, impossibly true. And it had started with 5 words from a stranger in a saloon. The lady wants to leave. Let her leave. Those words had changed everything. had set in motion a chain of events that led to this life, this love, this family. And Josephine would be grateful for them, and for the man who spoke them, every day for the rest of her life. Daniel and Josephine lived out their days on that ranch, surrounded by family and friends, secure in the love they had built and maintained for over 4 decades. They grew old together with grace and humor, facing the challenges of age as they had faced everything else, as a team. Josephine taught dance until she was 73, finally retiring when her knees made it too difficult to stand for long periods. But even then, she consulted with her successor, a former student who had returned to Wyoming after years of performing, passing on her knowledge and passion. Daniel worked the ranch until he was 80, only stepping back when his children and grandchildren gently, but firmly insisted it was time to let the younger generation take over. He spent his retirement building furniture in a workshop behind the house, crafting beautiful pieces that became family heirlooms. They passed away within months of each other, as couples who have been together for a lifetime sometimes do, neither able to imagine continuing without the other. Daniel went first, peacefully in his sleep, and Josephine followed 3 months later, as if she had just been waiting to make sure everything was in order before joining him. Their children and grandchildren gathered at the ranch for the funeral, telling stories and sharing memories, and marveling at the legacy their parents had built. Not just the physical ranch, though that was impressive enough, but the legacy of love and commitment and showing up for each other every single day. They saved each other, Charles said at the memorial service, his voice steady despite his grief. Mother always said Dad rescued her from a dangerous situation, bought her freedom. But Dad told me once that she rescued him just as much, that he was lost and angry and did not know who he was supposed to be, and she helped him figure it out. They saved each other, and then they spent the rest of their lives proving that salvation was worth it. The family buried them on that ridge above the ranch, the place they had returned to again and again throughout their marriage. Side by side, overlooking the land they had loved, with a simple headstone that read, Daniel and Josephine Grayson. Together forever. The ranch continued, passed down through the generations, each one adding their own touches but maintaining the core values that Daniel and Josephine had established. The dance hall became a community center, hosting classes and performances and gatherings. The horses continued to be bred and raised with care and respect. And the story of how it all began, of a cowboy who walked into a saloon and saved a dancer, became family legend. Children grew up hearing about their great-grandparents' love story, about courage and redemption, and the power of choosing each other every single day. Years became decades and the story remained, a reminder that sometimes the worst moments can transform into the best, that love can find you in the unlikeliest places, that one act of kindness can ripple out across generations. In San Pedro, California, the Dusty Rose Saloon eventually closed, replaced by newer buildings as the town grew and changed. But sometimes, on quiet nights, locals swore they could still hear the music, still see the shadow of a dancer moving across the stage, still feel the presence of a moment that changed 2 lives forever. And in Wyoming, on a ranch that sprawled across the valley, the descendants of Daniel and Josephine Grayson continued to thrive, living out the future their ancestors had fought so hard to create. They rode horses through the same mountains, worked the same land, loved with the same fierce commitment, because that was the true legacy Daniel and Josephine had left behind. Not just property or money or possessions, but a model of what love could be. Patient and kind and strong enough to weather any storm. Love that gave more than it took, that lifted up instead of tearing down, that created space for each person to become who they were meant to be. Love that rescued and was rescued, that healed and was healed, that chose and was chosen every single day for more than 40 years. Love that started with a frightened woman and a kind-hearted man and $500 in a California saloon. Love that proved, beyond any doubt, that sometimes fairy tales do come true. You just have to be brave enough to believe in them, brave enough to reach for them, brave enough to say yes when they offer you a hand and ask if you want to run towards something instead of away from everything. Josephine had been that brave. Daniel had been that brave. And their bravery had been rewarded with a lifetime of joy and meaning and love that echoed down through the generations. The end.